I'm going to talk to you about the biology of spiritual development, and it will incorporate something of an understanding of the great power source known as Kundalini. And Kundalini is a power source. It is the great mysterious and unknown factor that produces ultimately what we know as genius. Kundalini has, down through the ages, been known to the initiate few. It has been degraded, or it has been elevated, depending on the way you look at it, into some sort of religious mystique. In fact, the latest trend of thinking amongst the most important leaders in yoga is that this power, Kundalini, is a biological force. It's a biological force. And that adds up because of all the chakras in the body, that which can produce physical manifestations, purely physical manifestations only, I mean the only chakra that can produce physical manifestations is the chakra at the base of the spine, a four-petaled lotus wherein resides the serpent Kundalini, the symbol of the serpent representing the female force residing at the base of each human spine. And so, we are talking about an etherico-physical force that is present in all beings, from the tiniest atom right up through plants and animals to man himself and to the master. The force is present in all of these, residing in the gemstone in one chakra, residing also in the plant right up to man. The release of this force is graded. It is released in all forms of life, but it is graded particularly in mankind. There are fortunate individuals who are born with a stock, the physical stock, that automatically enables them to release this force, this Kundalini fire. Usually, however, the individual has earned such stock, such genetic construction of his physical tissues. He has usually earned such a body in past lives, and the soul makes use of this opportunity and expresses itself through such a person. So there are these. And then there are the few who, by virtue of serious esoteric disciplines, are able to release the force progressively in their lives. When we talk about serpent fire, we're talking about the anatomy of extrasensory perception. The anatomy of extrasensory perception. Every man treads a pathway which is strewn with lotuses. By that we mean we, being the seat of consciousness, we tread a pathway or move up the human spine. Our awareness moves progressively up the human spine. From a four-petaled lotus lying at the base of the spine, our consciousness rises to the sacral center, to the solar plexus chakra, and progressively upwards until a radiance in the head region signifies that we are ending the road, the pathway of spiritual unfoldment for man. This jeweled way that Socrates described, this pathway strewn with lotuses, leads to increasing release of the powers latent in man. And as we raise our consciousness, increasingly, the chakras concerned that we reach, and they are separated from each other by webs on the etheric part of the spine. As we reach a chakra in consciousness, the appropriate powers of that chakra become our own. The powers latent within us manifest as chakra after chakra opens progressively. Now, this is the inevitable evolution of man. It's the pathway that he is bound to take sooner or later. But through the release of Kundalini fire, a negative force residing at the base of the spine, overlying the sacral bone, the sacrum bone, a fusion of 5 pieces of vertebra at the base of the spine. Let us see what we're talking about here. We're talking about a foundation piece lying at the base of the spine, made up of 5 pieces of vertebra fused together to form the sacrum bone. A lovely foundation for the spine to stand on. And the chakra that we're talking about overlies this bone. When we are able to release Kundalini, however, the process of evolution is speeded up. The need to come back into incarnation perhaps another 100 or 200 or 300 times is reduced. The Kundalini fire, coaxed in ways that we're going to consider tonight, begins to move up the spine, achieving in that lifetime the efforts that would normally be spread for that individual over many lives. In fact, the process is one of short-circuiting evolution, short-circuiting the long, drawn-out process of reincarnation and rebirth. And this is what we're then talking about here tonight. The ultimate for this fire is to join its mate. The female serpent seeks and joins her mate. Her mate is a positive fire. The positive fire is known as solar fire. Solar fire. And we draw down into our bodies from the heart of the sun a second fire. It is the fire which produces evolution. In man, the evolution which spurs man onwards towards what Plato described as truth, beauty, and goodness. Solar fire streaming from the center of the sun, or rather from the heart of the sun, is brought in to the aura, focused as it is in its north pole in the third ventricle of the brain. The solar fire is drawn into the magnetic aura, very much like the particles are drawn into the magnetic aura of the Earth at the site of the North Pole, creating what is known as the aurora borealis. And so man produces, as it were, an influx of solar fire. The fire at the base of the spine, the female fire, is fire by friction. It is of a grosser kind. The fire at the base of the spine is part of the anima mundi of the Earth, the etheric body of the Earth. We need to understand that our planet Earth is not just the gross physical structure that we know so well. The planet Earth is interpenetrated by an etheric body, and anything that lives on the surface of the Earth is, as it were, underlaid by an etheric body. We're talking about a tree. The tree has got an etheric body. If we're talking about a man has an etheric body. And by means of the Earth's etheric body, all living things are connected by what Edgar Mitchell calls a continuum. I am linked to all living things by a continuum. That continuum is the anima mundi of the Earth, the etheric body of the Earth. I am linked to the etheric body of the Earth by forces which anchor me through the base of the spine chakra. From the base of the spine chakra, I am linked to all the etheric beings of this planet. And the fire of this planet, residing in its central core, may, when I undertake certain disciplines, start upwards from a different dimension and express itself in a torrent of fire that might surge up my spine, thus opening the chakras, the lotuses on that spine. So we're beginning to understand that this fire of Kundalini is female, that its outpost is at the base of the spine, and that it represents the force of the planetary logos, hence its power, hence the so-called dangers involved in tampering with this sacred fire. It has been described again and again in ancient literature, the Puranas of the Hindus, and in the sacred books of Egypt and Greece. We will refer to that in a short time. We only know this, that when the senses are quietened, when they are withdrawn, that then we can begin to release the serpent fire at the base of the spine. My subject tonight is concerned with the interaction of Kundalini with solar fire. And increasingly, these two meet at higher and higher regions on the spine. We must remember that we have the ability to encourage this process. The sighting of the chakra at the base of the spine may be related to the actual structure of the four-petaled lotus. The four-petaled lotus is a visual picture of that region of the spine where the human buttocks meet and where the sacrum bone lies in the upper segment and the perineum lies in the lower segment. And so we know the exact etheric sighting of this chakra. We know the exact etheric sighting of this chakra. We also know that we can stimulate this serpent power by directing our attention to that region. No known yoga asanas have been given out to the world which directly bring into play the serpent fire at the base of the spine. There are many supposed to do it, but none, to my knowledge, none, as far as I have witnessed in the West, have been actually demonstrated to bring this fire actually rushing up the spine. However, if the mind is directed to that region, energy will follow thought, and the energy of solar fire can be directed to that region to arouse the mate of solar fire, which is Kundalini. The great reptiles of the third round on this earth who perished from the earth about 70 or 80 million years ago, the great reptiles contained, as it were, a second spine. They grew and grew and grew so rapidly that they outgrew the conditions on the earth which enabled them to survive. And in growing to a height or a length of something like 90 feet, they required to develop a second brain. And the second brain of these great dinosaurs was located at the end of the spine, more or less in the position where we would say the base of the spine chakra would exist. So there is evidence that this is a region that is not only a place where a second brain might have been created or might be created, but it shows that there is a rapport existing between the base of the spine chakra and the head chakra, because the two brains lay at the ends of the spine, and there is still to this day in such creatures and in ourselves a rapport between the chakra at the base of the spine and that which lies in the head region. With this sort of preamble, we are beginning to get an understanding now of the complexity of man's nature. That man virtually is oriented between the earth and the sun. This is the sun, then we could say that man's head lies within the sphere of influence of the sun, and that the base of his spine lies oriented towards the center of the earth, and man is stretched between the two. And yoga is a process of bridging the gap between the two forces of the earth and the sun. And it is, of course, a process which is fraught with the necessity of discipline, so that the individual can be capable of managing the power that is released. As I said a little earlier today, you don't expect a child to grow into an adult overnight. It would be a disastrous situation. The power of the adult thrust into the hands of an adolescent would be dangerous. And this is true of the release of Kundalini fire. Where Kundalini tends to be released naturally in an individual because of his stock, the type of body he has inherited, it is because, as I said earlier, of good karma. He has earned the right to it, as it were. Now we ask ourselves, what are the ways in which the Kundalini fire can be aroused? And we must go to the origins that we have just described of this fire. Firstly, we have to say to ourselves, there is the possibility of arousing the fire directly, of acting upon that chakra, of contracting the anal sphincter, and bringing our awareness to the exact site of the solar plexus chakra. Of the base of the spine chakra. Energy follows thought. And if we are contracting a muscle in that region, it means that energy is flowing to that region. And this would be a direct method of stimulating the region of the base of the spine chakra. On the other hand, one would assume that this could be a fairly dangerous process. I have told you nothing today that you probably couldn't have understood from other teachers or from a good yoga book. And so we say that far from acting on the chakras below the diaphragm, it is far better to stimulate chakras which are the alter ego of centers below the diaphragm, above the diaphragm. In other words, instead of stimulating the base of the spine chakra directly and producing probably such friction as to cause nervous disorders or instability, it is far better to stimulate the alter ego of the basis of the spine chakra, which is the 1,000-petaled lotus, Sahasrara, the crowning glory of man. And so we say to ourselves then, what would stimulate the head chakras so that given an alerted base of the spine, the fires of Kundalini could be drawn up into the head region? How could this be achieved? The answer to that lies, ladies and gentlemen, of course, in the great science of meditation. Meditation is the master's gift to mankind, which teaches us a way of arousing the Kundalini force in a gentle, progressive sort of way, of bringing solar fire down into the aura, safely, progressively, so that his mate, Kundalini, the female fire, could be attracted upwards. The Kundalini fire has been described in much religious literature, as I have said. You can find references to it in the Vedas of India, in the Puranas, which is the mythology of India. You can see the snake used as a symbol on the heads of Egyptian hierophants. You can see the snake used with its twin in the caduceus of Hermes, the messenger of the gods. The Zulus, from my own testimony, worshipped a god who was said to be snake-like and called him Nkulunkulu. In South America, the worship of that great being was symbolized by a winged serpent. The Druids of England, who used Stonehenge, carried snakes about them as symbols of their ability to control the nadis on the spine, the serpent of Ida Sushumna and Pingala on the spine. Now we begin to come to consider something of the physiology of raising such important fires. Kundalini is entirely biological. That's what we're trying to say here tonight. It is entirely biological, and for reasons that I will give later. We only know that through persistent acts of concentration bring about changes in Kundalini. A man who learns to concentrate on what he does is automatically earning, as it were, the strength to arouse Kundalini. Any acts of concentration, particularly when these are, as it were, applied to symbols which attract down solar fire. We only know that for average man, for instance, the flow of Kundalini through that man is minimal. That the flow passes through him from the center of the earth and up his spine. But we know that increasingly man by virtue of his ability to concentrate, draws into himself increasing forces from the anima mundi of the earth. And these forces open up the nadis in his etheric body, increasingly and increasingly, so that this fire flows more and more through his vehicles. Now this is important, and it's a completely new idea and concept. The old idea was that we had to accumulate prana in our bodies, and the prana was fed to the nervous system, and the nerves conducted the prana and used the prana in order to move muscles. Now we're beginning to understand that the body can be charged with prana, that the organs of the body can be vibrant and alive and active, and that they begin to feed the nervous system. Now that is a completely new concept altogether, that the organs of the body, once charged with prana and fully functioning, in their turn, via the nerve endings, pour their energies into the nervous system. And we say that there are certain regions of the body that do this more than any. We say, for instance, that the prostatic plexus of nerves related to the sacral chakra will feed this divine etheric essence into the nervous system. We would say that the liver, we would say that any plexuses of nerves to any organs of the body will tend to feed an etheric essence into the nervous system, thus maintaining its vitalization. But for man on the path, we say that the region of the prostatic plexus and the nerves that supply the regenerative organs, these regenerate the nervous system more than any other part of the body below the diaphragm. And hence there has grown a concept, the idea, that by harboring the sexual energies, this can, as it were, vitalize the nervous system. And there's quite good evidence for this. You know, only the most diminutive quantities of the material in the body can produce a maximum change in consciousness. I think it's 1/300,000th of a gram of LSD can produce a profound change in human consciousness. 1/300,000th of a gram. No more than a speck of dust in extent. And that LSD can produce a profound change in human consciousness. What we're saying here today is that the fire of Kundalini is contained, and I quote here no lesser authority than the Tibetan master in Alice Bailey's book, A Treatise on Cosmic Fire, in which it states that fire by friction, a fire is like that is latent within every cell. And so we say that every cell of the body, producing through fire by friction, produces an essence which can be transferred into the nervous system. And that is a very, very new sort of concept of looking at yoga. And what we're saying here is that certain organs, vitalized by chakras, can donate energy into the nervous system. We begin to see now that the whole aspect of Kundalini is becoming, as it were, increasingly biological. May I remind you again of what I said a little earlier, that the very moment that we consciously produce concentration, the flow of prana into the body increases, and also from the cells there is produced this latent fire, which is the essence of Kundalini. And so the keys to the arousal of Kundalini and the key to meditation is a common factor. Now that's what should have emerged from what I've been saying, that whether we're talking about the arousal of Kundalini or whether we're talking about the bringing down of her mate into the spinal column, we are talking about a common factor, and that is concentration. Kundalini, fire, can be gathered from the cells of the body. It is concentrated in the chakra at the base of the spine. And so this concept that we have had before, that somehow or the other the fire, the serpent fire, resides in the chakra at the base of the spine, has misled us. The fire of Kundalini resides in every cell of the body. It is gathered, it is concentrated in the chakra at the base of the spine. And concentration is a factor common to true meditation and to the arousal of Kundalini. Now, the moment that the Kundalini begins to awaken, an amazing change begins to occur in the human who is thus involved. It begins to act immediately on the nervous system and works upwards right up to the crown of the head. The normal biological rhythms of the body begin to change. And when you are treading the path, when you are sensitive more than you've ever been in your life, you begin to notice how the rhythms of the body are changing. Well, this is an indication that Kundalini fire is being produced by all the cells and fed into the chakra at the base of the spine. It is as if the whole body begins to circulate light energy. And it's a very, very real phenomenon. I call manifestations of this light phenomenon, or what the East calls the uprising of Shakti, or life energy. I call the manifestation of this the growth, as it were, of a series of signposts on the path of spiritual unfoldment. When I do spiritual consultations and talk to people about their spiritual unfoldment, I listen very carefully because I can gauge the degree of the person's spiritual unfoldment from the signs that he has given to me about his experiences, what is happening in his body. Suddenly we're aware that every release of muscular energy which occurs is accompanied by a sensation of light. The stretching of the lungs and sneezing, a sudden phenomenon that some of us inevitably have, is accompanied by a blaze of light in the head. We begin to notice that our yoga exercises of kumbhaka, of retaining the breath, produce light. And again, these flashes of light warn us, tell us, that this fluid, this glorious essence of Kundalini is beginning to flow through us. We're on the lookout for methods of measuring this inflow of Kundalini. It is the unknown, undiscovered factor of evolution. And I hope that within my lifetime, that sensitive instruments and devices could be applied to my own body, where I direct them, and that a rhythm can be recorded, because I know that on certain occasions when I'm relaxed, I can feel the pulsation of this energy flowing through me, sometimes in the feet, sometimes in the trunk, sometimes in the neck, in the head region. It is a pulsation that I can feel and averages about once every 4 seconds. No possible confusion with the beat of the heart. Emanuel Swedenborg registered the same phenomenon. He himself noticed that occasionally when he was quiet, there was a rhythm passing through him that was quite unrelated to the circulation of the blood, the pumping of the heart, if you wish. And so we are talking about, may I re-emphasize, a phenomenon that is biological. And who knows that the next century may not carry out experimentation on beings who have become highly and suddenly creative and will be able to locate this extraordinary expression of divine grace we call it. You will notice when it begins to flow through you a change in your taste apparatus, in your touch, the sensitivity of your ears to sound, in a condition which Robert Browning describes as estolepsy, a turning of the consciousness inwards rather than epilepsy, where the consciousness is lost outwardly. Things like depression that may have been characteristic of you in your early life and even into middle age vanish like vapors of the night air when the sun contacts them. You will find that such things as negative thinking and lack of confidence just fade away the moment that this Kundalini fire begins to throb through you. It is not an abnormal thing. It is the ultimate destiny for all mankind. We have, for reasons of absolute ignorance, confined it and considered it that it was anchored at the base of the spine and that there was only a rigid way of releasing it, when all the time it is flowing through those who are obviously and can be witnessed to be the most creative people in society. And so we say that the nerve endings of our bodily systems, of the nervous systems, the nerve endings are able to suck up the fluid, this divine fluid stemming from the anima mundi of the planet into the central nervous system. There is good evidence that we have such passages or possible passages for the flow of such exquisite essence. Emanuel Swedenborg showed in his anatomy that the cerebrospinal fluid inside the central nervous system flowed down the olfactory nerves and surfaced in the nose. We have good evidence that there are neurohormones which pass down the nerve endings from the hypothalamus, the feeling part of the brain, into the posterior pituitary, and via a system of portal blood into the anterior pituitary. We're beginning to find tracks all over the body that carry things that we didn't know existed before. So I say that the years ahead will show the existence of this magnificent pranic radiation that slowly establishes itself in the body, working outwards from the center at the base of the spine, so that when it reaches into the head, it is seen as a luminous cloud, not only inside the head, but without it. We begin to detect it. One of the effects of this extraordinary essence of Kundalini is that it calms the mind, and all the dartings and the ragings of the mind and the furnace of the emotions seem to be calmed by the steady inflow of this divine fluid. And wherever you have got her mate, solar fire flowing into the body, you will find this divine essence. We are beginning to find that this Kundalini energy reaches into the digestive system. If you have a change in your digestive processes, you might suspect a disease if they are disordered, but when they become more refined, more efficient, then you can think in terms of Kundalini beginning to reach them. And a magnificent digestive system seems to be a characteristic of the Kundalini flow as it gets higher and higher in the body. And one of the characteristics of this new digestion that we produce is that it becomes more selective to the qualities of food that you present it with, demands higher qualities of food, rejects some of the grosser qualities of food that were happily accepted by the body before. And the whole thing is changing. We now find that the mind, when we eat, is important, the state in which it exists. That saying grace is virtually something that does encourage the absorption of food if we put ourselves not only by saying grace but into a state of grace when we eat. And this is what we mean when we say that Kundalini is spreading. Now what does it mean, ladies and gentlemen? What in heaven's name does it mean? Why should some men and women be singled out for this creative force? And what is it leading to? It is leading towards something that is unavoidable to any man ready to be born into the fifth kingdom of nature. I have said it already. It is leading to rebirth, except ye be reborn. I'll give you the quotation in a moment. Stronger and stronger connections are established by means of this divine fluid with the anima mundi. And the more that you are able to concentrate at a higher level, the more you become integrated, yoged with the divine planetary logos, and less existent as an individual. You are practicing in advanced nirvana, oneness with all. You are beginning to link yourself with Him, You're beginning to have flashes of His consciousness, flashes of His power in you. So we begin to prepare in this way, and there are signposts on that way, for rebirth, the rebirth of the neophyte. The first thing that happens is the rejuvenation of the tissues, the rejuvenation of the tissues in the way that I have described. The circulatory system becomes more powerful. It is able to ward off disease. Its immune reactions are stronger. Influenza, head colds, and things become unavailable to such a new body. Please go. I know it's getting very late, and I understand. So here we have the pangs of rebirth, the pangs of rebirth. And until this happen, the man cannot enter the kingdom of heaven. Such a circulatory system resists the freezing cold. A classic example of it, of course, is old Socrates, standing out in the cold each day, or unassailed, unworried by the heat of the Grecian sun, doing his meditation in commune with his daemon, his higher self. This is a great characteristic of the yogis, who can sit at 12,000 feet almost naked and resist the cold at that temperature, at that height, This is the basis of the endurance and stamina of the body system, an endurance that staggers those about these individuals. Their ability to completely relax in the face of great danger, which would normally make them be regarded as schizophrenic, who laugh when things go wrong. But no, these individuals are so noble that they're not going to be worried by the threats to personality. They know of their immortality. This is what we're talking about. In the male, the amount of semen use is increased in vast quantities. The organs can barely hold the material in them. Even without sexual excitation, there will be flows of the material. If you went to a doctor, he would say that you have a neurosis, and that the flows is the result of a constant contraction of the nerves in the prosthetic plexus and elsewhere. We only know that this increase of regenerative fluid is but a signpost on the path of unfoldment, an indication that rebirth is coming closer, it's nearer, it's imminent. The semen, instead of being ejected for momentary pleasure, can be used, can be absorbed into the body of such a being for hastening this regenerative process. It also encourages what we call the metamorphosis of the individual, the spiritual metamorphosis, the change of the individual spiritually from a caterpillar to a cocoon, from a cocoon to an imago. What a change this is. A change which has many correlations, and the Egyptians were aware of it. They were aware of it. That average man in Egypt was a caterpillar, grinding away, rubbing at its living, if you wish, and at death went into a cocoon, or a mummy, which is just like a cocoon, and that from that position ascended into a glorious winged being, into another world. We are like that. Many other things begin to occur, things that have so far escaped the biologists because they are too subtle to measure. The energies of Kundalini are taken up by the blood system as well as the nervous system. We find that in the region of the brain there forms a sort of a blood film or blood bath, as it were. We know this to be true anyway. We know that arteries end in the brain substance, and that these arteries pour the blood into this region of the brain. We now know that Kundalini, the essence of Kundalini, is carried in the blood, and in highly developed individuals whose chakras in the head region are beginning to open, the Kundalini essence can be held in concentration in this sort of blood sink made up of material, blood material deposited by the end arteries in the brain. And that this region can be one which receives impressions of higher experiences, of the higher world, can be recorded in the blood films or the blood sinks created in the brain. Normally, the sensitivity is not there, but when when the Kundalini energies begin to flow in the blood system and in the nervous system, the region of the brain becomes a receiving plate for impressions of Atma, Buddhi, and Manas from the higher world. So man is changed, greatly changed by this procedure. We begin to understand the biblical quotation which describes rebirth. It goes like this: "Verily, verily, I say unto thee, except a man be born of water and of the Spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God. That which is born of the flesh is flesh, and that which is born of the Spirit is spirit. Marvel not that I said unto thee, he must be born again." Words are clear. Unless a man be born of water, be baptized, unless he be born again of the Spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God. And that which is born of the flesh is flesh, but that which is born of the Spirit, meaning of Kundalini essence, produces the real rebirth that takes him into the higher kingdom. Examples of individuals who've reached the state of grace. You could name as many as I can. I can think of many names of the most creative beings I know, which would be meaningless to you. But let us talk about Lord Alfred Tennyson, William Wordsworth, Emanuel Swedenborg, Annie Besant, Marcel Proust, Stanley Hopkins, and many, many others. There are unmistakable external signs of this rebirth that occurs through the influx of Kundalini. The initiate becomes a genius or a virtuoso of a high order if he was an initiate to begin with. With the rebirth, he is changed. Such individuals develop tremendous powers of expression, whether it is in oratory, whether it is in verse or in prose, or in other artistic talents. Suddenly, almost out of nowhere, they begin to produce voluminous artistic expression. They develop precognition, develop powers of healing, psychic talents, and they manifest very, very obviously to those about them strong will and determination, confidence. Things like these begin to blossom. If the person is an intellectual and he has this rebirth, the spiritual regeneration, then a healthy constitution and noble attributes of character will be transformed into a spiritual prodigy. Someone like that becomes an idol for the eyes of the adoring crowd. I can think of innumerable examples of those who have been transformed. They become the most magnetic of people. Now, the words that I'm quoting here, ladies and gentlemen, are not mine. They come from a person who is well known in the West as well as in the East, Gopi Krishna. You can read about this in his writings. I'm here to add my own personal testimony to the testimony of saints, to others who have had this experience for themselves. It is not something I've cooked up recently. I can refer you to my journal, Aquarius, to an article called Pangs of Rebirth that goes back 10 or 15 years. You had said to me 3 years ago that you would write 10 books which would become occult bestsellers in North America, that they would be illustrated as no other esoteric works are illustrated in the world, the cynosure of all eyes and bookshops. I would never have believed that of me. I had an ambition that one day Wiser's would publish one of my books. When I wrote them or got down to writing them, Wiser's carry the whole damn lot. And that is as nothing. And I am as astounded and as staggered by it as anybody else. Now, ladies and gentlemen, let me emphasize, I have not had an immaculate conception. I am no different from any of you. I am born human. Believe me, this is available to every one of you. Man, know thyself. You heard Celia Hansen start this lovely festival off with just these words. And I set out at a very early age to know myself. I saw phenomena like you saw tonight when I was 11, 12, 13. I had had experiences as a child as well. And I set out to know myself. It was with that intention that I did a medical degree and did many other things. We have talked about Kundalini, that energy, that Shakti that rises from a concentrating point at the base of the spine. We need to go to the opposite end of the spine and to consider the physiology of meditation, for that is important too, the physiology of meditation. Meditation brings down solar fire. The solar fire blending with fire by friction produces the glory of the initiate and of the saint. That fire that comes through meditation burns away the dross of despair and fear and depression. You know, it's so easy to begin it. You can ignore everything that I've said here tonight. You can go away to the quietness of your own rooms any time you wish, and you can begin to meditate. You can begin to meditate. Meditation, you know, is something that begins with learning merely to sit in silence. Learn merely to sit in silence, and you will be taking a great step towards the act of meditating. I think that that is a most important observation, and I'm going to spend a little time on it. I shall be going into the subject again tomorrow evening when I talk, or afternoon when I talk on the dominant half of the brain. If you can't meditate, learn to sit in silence. Why should you learn to do this? The reason is that the soul disseminates in silence. The soul disseminates in silence. For most of us, our lives are a perpetual humdrum of eternal noise. As I said earlier today, sound is shape-forming. Sound is shape-forming. Pick up a violin bow and play notes near a tray of sand, and the sand will vibrate and produce shapes typical of snowflakes and other forms. And if your lower triad is reverberating to endless noise and sound, a delicate bowstring of the soul cannot create the shapes that it wants. And the shape that the soul wants to create or to effect, witness the mandalas, is the symmetry of the opening of its 9 petals. The petals of love, the petals of knowledge, petals of sacrifice. So we say, learn to sit in silence. The soul disseminates in silence. The soul learns to anchor itself, to secure its grasp of the lower triad when we meditate or we sit silently. Meditation provides the silent period of gestation for the soul, a period of gestation in which the soul prepares to emerge into the world. I had this experience myself. I went into voluntary retirement in 1953, and I retired for 3 long years into a waste, a wilderness in southern Africa, alone virtually for 3 years. And the sort of changes that I have described here tonight were things that happened to me. And it was as if I could feel this thing within me beginning to open itself and to change me. The long, long hours of silence, when I could meditate no longer, when I could hold my mind no longer in focus, I yet learned to sit in silence. Humped a great big easy chair up onto a hillock which overlooked a low-lying plain and where I could see the sun rise every morning. Long before the sun was up, I was seated on that easy chair way on the top of a hill, talk about doing yoga in style, watching for the sun to rise in the east, learning to visualize in that clear air of the morning and that lovely sound, with lovely quietness, learning to visualize this great orange ball that was going to come over up just in that spot in front of me, learning to visualize it with my eyes shut and then seeing it in reality as it came over the horizon. Even then I knew that that orb, whether it was visualized or actually seen and concentrated on, I knew that that orb was an accumulator of energy. Today it's easy talk to say that shapes are accumulators of energy. Pyramids, spheres, cubes, whatever their shape, they have particular qualities appropriate to that shape, and we can visualize them, and we can energize ourselves according to their qualities. Visualization of a sphere is like visualizing a lens, and a lens means concentrated power. We take a lens and we can concentrate the light of the sun and burn our skins. If we can visualize a lens in here, we bring in that blood sink that I described a little earlier, bring to bear a manipulation of the subtle forces into a lens which brings the quality of being able to concentrate. How many of us don't need to learn to concentrate? I've given you a wonderful meditational exercise. So those 3 years of withdrawal helped me to prepare for the soul's emergence in the world. And then I was able to say to the Master, he had come into my home, way out in the wilds. He had come into my home, and he had sat there in a half-oriental asana in a half-western position. And he had told me what my destiny was to be, that I was to go out and to study the science of medicine, that I was to go out into the world and to teach and to heal, because the ray of my soul was the second ray of love wisdom. And I was ready for it. My soul had grasped its lower vehicles because I had learned to sit in silence and to meditate, and in silence the soul disseminates. Never regard periods of withdrawal in your life as periods of inactivity, of negativity, not when you're on the path. Remember always the caterpillar and the cocoon and the imago into which it will emerge. Just when you think the caterpillar is doing nothing, that it has withdrawn to rest in its cocoon, it is changing as it has never changed before. It is growing new organs to take it into a world of new dimensions, to fly through the air instead of being anchored to the green leaf. All that's going on during the period of withdrawal. Examine your own lives. If you have not periods of withdrawal, you will not grow. You can surround yourselves with facts. You can listen to tapes until you are blue in the face, until you are prepared to withdraw increasingly. The transformation, the metamorphosis of the spiritual embryo cannot be achieved. Silence is golden. How often weren't you taught that as a kid? And the nature of the soul's radiance is golden. The nature of the soul's radiance is golden, and silence is golden. In ancient days, men always dug for buried treasure in silence. It was an understood thing that as they dug, that no man spoke, because that would destroy the spell. And when the chest was struck, if one of them had spoke, it would be empty. If they dug in silence, when they struck that chest, they would know that the spell still held, and that it would be full of gold. Man on the path is the same. When he seeks for the greatest and the deepest of all treasures, he should be at his most silent. Don't talk about it. You will destroy the effect of it. Don't talk about it. Whatever you say will modify it, whatever that experience has been in the silence. If it was the voice of the silence talking to you, don't talk about it. You will destroy the spell, treasure buried inside the chest. The chatterbox is never a meditator. You can be absolutely sure of it. I will stare any chatterbox in the face and tell him he does not meditate. As sure a sign as it is that those who smoke heavily late at night don't remember their dreams. If they don't remember their dreams, what knowledge have they of their subjective life? They have destroyed the avenues to it. Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. And you know that we have many faculties that function best in silence. And they're so mundane that we're inclined to overlook them and forget that they could be developed. The other night, I had a vivid dream. I was trying to analyze its meaning, as usual, and it all hinged, the interpretation of the dream hinged on whether I could remember the name of a doctor that had appeared in this dream. I hadn't seen this doctor for 20 years. I searched my mind for it. Couldn't remember him. And so I used the old devices that I've used many times before, in absolute silence, to present to my higher self the facts of the situation. I wanted this doctor's name. I remembered other doctors who were in association with him and knew their names. I presented many other facets of his environment. He taught me histology, the use of a microscope. I fitted this all in, presented it to the higher nature, the soul, and left it and lay in silence. Nearly half an hour later, came through just like that, Dr. Ramsey. That was the name. Immediately I was able to fit it into the symbology of the dream and to interpret it in the way I wanted to. Meditation and silence. What great gifts these are to us. They bring back memory not only as the one I've described, but memory of previous lives. Memory of previous lives come to those who lead the meditative way of life. Lord Alfred Tennyson used to do this. He used to sit in silence and sound his own name, Alfred, Alfred, and wait for something to come back. Sound your own name in the silence and listen for the voice that will come back. A way of making contact with previous lives. Well, ladies and gentlemen, it's 11:15. I shall finish this particular lecture tomorrow afternoon when I do the dominant half of the brain. I would like to spend the time that we have left in answering questions, and if any of you wish to leave at this late hour, please go along, and thank you very much for having me here tonight.